What's going on, my fellow Raiders, Doomers, Crusaders, Scullies, Fivers, and Whip enthusiasts out there? It's me, Russell, I run the Rusty Bull Whips YouTube channel, and it's time for another whip-related video. We're finally going back to the formula, folks. So this is just going to be a quick little instructional video directed towards beginning whip crackers for simple tips to know when you are using a whip for the first time. These are just going to be 3 tips for beginning whip crackers. So we will start with tip number 1. Tip 1 is choosing the right whip length. So I think it's incredibly important that a beginner should choose the correct length of whip for their needs. And I think that the best sweet spot, especially if you're going to be choosing a bull whip, which is one that I would highly recommend just because of how easy they are to use and how rigid and stiff they are, is definitely a 6-foot or 7-foot bullwhip. And the reason I say 6-footers and 7-footers is because they are just right in the middle. They are the perfect sweet spot for a beginner to learn because they are not too short and they are not too long. If you went any shorter than a 6-footer, your movement is going to have to be very fast and your habits are going to be super fast if you pick up a longer whip, and you will have to exert more energy. Or vice versa. If you pick anything longer than a 7-footer, let's say maybe an 8-footer or even a 10-footer, the movement is so slow that if you pick up something shorter, it will be harder to adjust to the length. Timing and movement is everything when it comes to whip cracking, not just form. So picking the right length is essential. Notice here that I'm using a 3-foot miniature bullwhip made by Tyler Burke. This whip is incredibly fast and meant for indoor use, but you can see since it's so short, I have to use a lot more energy and I have to move faster. And here I'm using an 8-foot kangaroo hide Indiana Jones bullwhip made by Joe Strain. And you can see how long this whip is and how heavy it is. I have to move a lot slower with my movements, and it is a little more difficult to control the whip because it is so long. And here are the sweet spot whips. This is a 7-foot economy bullwhip made by Torrance Fisher of Sword Guy Builds, and you can see how important it is to have one of these as a middle ground whip because I'm not moving too fast or too slow, I'm moving at just the right pace. And same with the 6-footer. It's only a foot less, but I'm able to move pretty fast, whilst also delivering very effective and very prominent sounding cracks, and the whip isn't too heavy or too light. These are just my own personal thoughts on what makes a good starter whip, at least lengthwise. You don't have to pick a 6-footer or a 7-footer to start with, but I'm just saying that it will make your learning process a lot easier if you're just starting out with whip cracking. So finally, with all that said, let's move on to tip number 2. Tip number 2 is to let the whip do the work. So you finally got your first bullwhip. Congratulations. Now it's time to learn how to crack it. No, what are you doing? Stop! Bruh. So if you couldn't tell, snapping a whip down like that is not how you do it. It is not a towel. A very basic beginner mistake that many make is that they snap it down like a towel because they think it's the wave of the whip that is cracking against itself and making that noise. That's not how it works. Beginners also sometimes crack the whip and draw it back towards themselves and end up hitting themselves or getting it tangled around like you see here. Here's the proper way to do it. Notice how I'm keeping my arm straight and I'm keeping the whip straight as well, and it's forming a nice straight loop behind me and it's staying on the same side of my body. If you have a well-made nylon or leather whip, the whip should crack itself. You don't have to put a lot of force just to get it to crack. And you don't have to fight with the whip either. Let the whip move with you. Paying attention to how the whip flows out and how you move will help you to have a better time transitioning into other cracks. This may also help you get rid of any fear that you have of any erratic movements that the whip might make. I hope you found your first session with your whip okay, and now it's time to learn the final step, tip number 3. The final step is to keep your whips clean. You might have noticed that your whip has picked up a little bit of dust and dirt from the outdoor elements, and maybe the cracker is a little tangled up, or maybe it's a little worn out from all the cracking you did, so it's time to maintain those things. So we're just going to clean the outside layer of our whip from all the dust, and we're going to use these alcohol disinfecting wipes. Little word of advice, only use these alcohol wipes if you're using a nylon whip, because if you use a leather whip, there's no telling what it could do. It might damage the leather, and you don't want that to happen. If you have a leather whip, try to use a special dressing like Picard's leather dressing. Okay, time to clean the whip. So we're just going to wipe the outside layer, and we're just going to wipe maybe near the end of the thong, and we're going to be just moving our wipe along and just picking off all that dust that might have gotten trapped on the outside layer, just to keep our whip nice and clean. And make sure you get the fall too. Yeah, there we go. Got a little bit of dust and dirt off of that. Sometimes there might be frayed sections on the paracord of the whip, and it's hard to see, but if those pop up, you might want to take a lighter and just lightly go over the frayed bits and just fray them back up so they don't continue to deteriorate over time as you crack the whip. Make sure you replace your cracker every time if you get a knot in the body of the cracker, because it might affect the performance of the whip later down the line if you just keep using the same one over and over. Take some scissors and just snip off the old cracker. Open up the eye into the body of the cracker and slide it onto the tip of the fall, like that. And tie a half hitch. Slide the cracker down the fall just a little bit and tie a half hitch going around the back and pull it tight. Like that. And there you go, brand new cracker. So with all of these steps out of the way, these were just 3 beginner tips for brand new whip crackers. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. Be sure to follow these steps in the video if you want to have a more fun and more interesting whip cracking experience. And see you guys very soon.